Chapter 6, Lmbrn, in which is given some account of the episode of the hippopotami, and of the voyager's attempt at controlling an Ogwe canoe, and also of the Igalawa tribe. I say goodbye to the Talaguga with much regret, and go on board the Chptr when she returns from Najol with all my bottles and belongings. On board I find no other passenger. The captain's English has widened out considerably, and he is as pleasant, cheery, and spoiling for a fight as ever. But he has a preoccupied manner, and a most peculiar set of new habits, which I find are shared by the engineer. Both of them make rapid dashes to the rail, and nervously scan the river for a minute, and then return to some occupation, only to dash from it to the rail again. During breakfast their conduct is nerve-shaking. Hastily taking a few mouthfuls, the captain drops his knife and fork and simply hurls his seaman-like form through the nearest door out onto the deck. In another minute he is back again, and with just a shake of his head to the engineer, continues his meal. The engineer shortly after flies from his seat, and being far thinner than the captain, goes through his nearest door with even greater rapidity, returns and shakes his head at the captain, and continues his meal. Excitement of this kind is infectious, and I also wonder whether I ought not to show a sympathetic friendliness by flying from my seat and hurtling myself on to the deck through my nearest door too. But although there are plenty of doors, as 4 enter the saloon from the deck, I do not see my way to doing this performance aimlessly, and what is this world they are both after, I cannot think. So I confine myself to a woman's true sphere, and assist in a humble way by catching the wine and Vichy water bottles, glasses, and plates of food, which at every performance are jeopardized by the members of the nobler sex, starting off with a considerable quantity of the ample tablecloth wrapped around their legs. At last I can stand it no longer, so ask the captain point blank, what is the matter? Nothing, says he, bounding out of his chair and flying out of his doorway. But on his return he tells me he has got a bet on 2 bottles of champagne with Wermer's agent for Najol as to who shall reach Lmbrn first, and the German agent has started off some time before the éclaireur in his little steam launch. During the afternoon we run smoothly along, the free pulsations of the engines telling what a very different thing coming down the Ogwe is to going up against it in its terrific current. Every now and again we stop to pick up cargo, or discharging over-carried cargo, and the captain's mind becomes lulled by getting no news of the Werman's launch having passed down. He communicates this to the engineer. It is impossible she could have passed the éclaireur since they started, therefore she must be somewhere behind at a sub-factory. N'est-ce pas? Oui, certainement, says the engineer. The engineer is, by these considerations, also lulled, and feels he may do something else but scan the river a la Sister Anne. What that something is puzzles me. It evidently requires secrecy, and he shrinks from detection. First he looks down one side of the deck, no one there. Then he looks down the other, no one there. So good so far. Then I see he has put his head through one of the saloon portholes, no one there. He hesitates a few seconds, until I begin to wonder whether his head will suddenly appear through my port. But he regards this as an unnecessary precaution, and I hear him enter his cabin, which abuts on mine, and there is silence for some minutes. Writing home to his mother, think I, as I go to putting on a new braid around the bottom of a worn skirt. Almost immediately after follows the sound of a little click from the next cabin, and then apparently one of the denizens of the infernal regions has got its tail smashed in a door, and the heavy hot afternoon air is reft by an incoherent howl of agony. I drop my needlework and take to the deck, but it is after all only that shy retiring young man practicing secretly on his clarinet. The captain is drowsily looking down the river, but repose is not long allowed to that active spirit. He sees something in the water. What? Hippopotami! He ejaculates. Now both he and the engineer frequently do this thing, and then fly off to their guns. Bang, bang, finish. But this time he does not dash for his gun, nor does the engineer, who flies out of his captain at the sound of the war shout, Hippopotami! In vain I look across the broad river with its stretch of yellow sandbanks where hippopotame should be, but I can see nothing but four black stumps sticking up in the water away to the right. Meanwhile, the captain and the engineer are flying about, getting off a crew of blacks into a canoe we are towing alongside. This being done, the captain explains to me that on the voyage up, the engineer had fired at and hit a hippopotamus, and without doubt this was its body floating. We are now close enough even for me to recognize the four stumps as the deceased's legs, and soon the canoe is alongside them and makes fast to one, and then starts to paddle back, hippo and all, to the Eclaireur. But no such thing. Let them paddle and shout as hard as they like. The hippo's weight simply anchors them. The Eclair by now has dropped down the river past them, has to sweep round and run back. Recognizing promptly what the trouble is, the energetic captain grabs up a broom, ties a light cord belonging to a lead line to it, and holds the broom by the end of its handle, swinging it around his head, and hurls it at the canoe. The arm of a merciful providence being interposed, the broom tomahawk does not hit the canoe, wherein, if it had, it must infallibly have killed someone, but falls short and goes tearing off with the current, well out of reach of the canoe. The captain, seeing this gross dereliction of duty by the chargeur renews broom, hauls it in by hand over hand, and talks to it. Then he ties the other end of its line to the mooring rope, and, by a better aimed shot, sends the broom into the water about 10 yards above the canoe, and it drifts towards it. Breathless excitement. Surely they will get it now. Alas, no. Just when it is within reach of the canoe, a fearful shudder runs through the broom. It throws its head and sinks beneath the tide. A sensation of stun comes over all of us. The crew of the canoe, ready and eager to grasp the approaching aid, gaze blankly at the circling ripples round where it sank. In a second the captain knows what has happened. That heavy hawser has been paid out after it has dragged it down, so he hauls it on board again.